It's actually about Caoimhín Kelleher, who's obviously doing quite well at Liverpool right now, banging on Alisson's door to be the first choice goalkeeper, has been the first choice in the Cups, which is probably why Simon Hughes is writing about this, because we could be about to see a Cork player, young Irishman, lead Liverpool out this weekend in a final. And I mean, listen, it's the Carabao Cup, it's not the FA Cup, it's not the Champions League, but it is a big competition, and Jurgen Klopp has shown a lot of faith in him. Is there a sense that Caoimhín Kelleher could be the next big Cork footballer in terms of the long tradition of Cork footballers playing for the Republic of Ireland?
I would say to you 100% yes, if it wasn't for his position. And the problem is he's not first choice for club or country at the moment, but we're talking right now, and I'm sure his profile will grow. I think it will help enormously if Liverpool actually win the Cup this weekend, and either he keeps a clean sheet or he plays well, which you'd completely back him to do. But luckily, from a Republic of Ireland point of view, we just have a brilliant array of talent and goal at the moment, so that's brilliant. And with Liverpool, as long as Alisson stays and he isn't injured or has a long-term suspension or a catastrophic loss of form, he's not going to break into the Liverpool team. He's going to play sporadically. Jurgen Klopp and everybody at Liverpool seems to love him. It was brilliant to see him in goal at Stamford Bridge for that brilliant 2-2 draw against Chelsea in the Premier League just before the Africa Cup of Nations, and to see him play so well in that match despite conceding 2 goals, which I don't think he had much chance with either of them. Kovacic is one of those goals, isn't it? It was like one of the goals of the season.
Yeah, it was.
So
he
did really well, and it was just brilliant to see an Irish player playing at that level, because it's been so long since we've seen that. And that's, to answer your question, why I think he's absolutely a Cork star of the future. I just hope that he plays enough for people to appreciate him.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre situation where we're sitting here with a goalkeeper who's about to play in a Carabao Cup final against Chelsea, and the player who is Ireland's number 1 goalkeeper is playing for Portsmouth in a lower division.
And warranted.
And warranted as well, because Gavin Bazunu has been absolutely phenomenal for Ireland when he's played, and he's been absolutely brilliant for Portsmouth, and we know that he's going to play at a bigger level, and we know he's going to play at a higher level, but the difference between them is that one went on loan to a senior club and one stayed where he is and is still fighting for his position. Well, it's almost typical Ireland here, where we need a striker, we need a goal scorer, probably need a couple more midfielders, but what we're stuck with are 2 brilliant young goalkeepers who are going to fight for this position. In terms of Caoimhín Kelleher, do you think he should win whatever he can with Liverpool this season and then potentially force a move regardless of whether Liverpool want to keep him or not?
No, I can totally understand Caoimhín Kelleher's position at Liverpool currently and how he sees himself fitting in. You've got Jurgen Klopp this week speaking up about how much they want to keep Caoimhín Kelleher, which is why they've made him the cup goalkeeper and very much the defined number 2 this season at Liverpool. Because on the occasions where Alisson has not been able to play in the Champions League, a couple of times in the Premier League and also in the cup competitions where we've had Kelleher playing for Liverpool exclusively this season, he has performed really well. He's a very good modern goalkeeper as well, where his distribution and work with his feet are in the very, very highest percentile, even within the goalkeepers that are in the Premier League. His distribution is excellent. You combine that with his shot stopping and the experience that he's gaining currently at Liverpool. Because I was at the press conference back in the autumn where Kelleher was asked about the situation with Bazunu, where he has gone one direction, which is to go down the leagues and get himself experience at Rochdale and at Portsmouth and to build up that experience, while Kelleher has decided to stay at Anfield, to wait his chance, to learn from the players who are around him. And Kelleher made the point, it's like, I am learning from Robertson, from Virgil van Dijk, from Alisson, every single day at Liverpool. He seems to have a really good relationship with the coaching staff who are there. A goalkeeper's career tends to be a little bit longer than outfielders as well. So I don't think Kelleher will be as concerned at still his very youthful age about the fact that he's sitting as backup in the Premier League. This would be more of a concern, I think, if it was an outfield player who was missing out on important years of their development by comparison. So I think Kelleher is happy enough to stay at Liverpool. I think they will have a decision to make, though, say after next season, because I'm sure he would be comfortable enough to stay around next season, playing the cup competitions, particularly, as you say, if he wins a Carabao Cup medal this coming weekend, it makes it all that more sweeter because he will have been the number 1 goalkeeper for that competition. It's probably next year that he has to make a decision on whether he wants to go out on loan. And like Bazunu, by his own admission as well, says that he is an interesting conversation to have with Manchester City this coming summer too. Where do they see him fitting in? Because they're sitting behind arguably the 2 best goalkeepers in the Premier League in Alisson and Ederson. It's very unlikely, as much as we like our 2 Republic of Ireland keepers who are very much to the fore, that they're going to get much first-team action. And then there has to just be a clear pathway from the club as to where they want to go. I think it's worth mentioning as well, because Kelleher would have probably been Ireland's number 1 for the last year or so, if he hadn't been, I think he was sick as opposed to unfit ahead of the game against Serbia, where he could have played away from home as opposed to Mark Travers, then who knows? Kelleher could have had a good game. Maybe he gets in ahead of Bazunu and Travers, and we're talking about him as number one at this stage. But Mark Travers has recovered well from that unfortunate night that he had there where Bazunu got in the next night. That actually Travers has been playing some good club football since. So I wouldn't totally write off Travers making this a three-way competition for the Irish number one shirt over the next few seasons as well.
Well, that's the thing. Travers could also be a Premier League goalkeeper by this time next year. So I think the route for Kelleher is probably going to be a little bit longer, but it could eventually lead to a more lucrative position. I mean, if you think to, say, Lukas Fabianski, who was Szczesny's number two at Arsenal for so many years, and then suddenly, Szczesny makes a couple of mistakes, Fabianski gets in there, but eventually he gets a move away to a different club and his stars, because suddenly people are seeing, okay, this guy's actually a really, really good goalkeeper and has been a number one goalkeeper now for a good Premier League club for a number of years. So potentially that's what Kelleher's going to do. Maybe he's not going to be Liverpool's goalkeeper, for number one goalkeeper ever, but he could eventually lead to be a very solid Premier League goalkeeper regardless.
But your original question was, is he going to be a star of a Cork sportsman and for Ireland as well? And I have no doubt that he'll be a solid goalkeeper who'll have a very good professional career. But I have higher hopes for him again, and he could be absolutely excellent at a world level. We just don't, from what we've seen of him, we just don't know that for certain. But we've seen glimpses of it, so we need to see it for sure. Well, do you know he started off as a striker until he was 13?
Surprised me.
Banging in the goals, and then he went in goal because there was a shortage for his club, bringing Mahon Rangers in Cork.
The idea of pigeonholing a young player of that age into a certain position, it's so nonsensical at that point. They had no idea where they're going to end up. How many wing backs or right backs have you heard was an exceptional striker in his younger age, and you eventually just
Roy King was a striker.
Exactly.
But Kelleher's only been in goal for 10 years of his entire life.
Well, he's doing quite well for those.
Oh, were you doing it 23? Yeah, that's the question I ask everyone tonight.
I think I was working in here. I'm still working in here. Yeah. Let's move on, because I guess the next point is that Kelleher's playing in a final this weekend, the Carabao Cup final. Previously the Milk Cup final, also the Coca-Cola Cup final.
Worthington Cup.
It'll always be the Carling Cup final to me, personally. But it's the Carabao Cup final. It's Tuchel against Klopp, protege against leader, or whatever you want to call him. Master against. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. But Tuchel is level now, essentially level with Klopp. He's not really, you can't really say it's, master against apprentice. That's the saying. Master against apprentice, because Tuchel has won a Champions League. He's won several cups now with Chelsea. At this point, he is a super manager, as he is, and this is a difficult one for him. I think this is probably the most difficult final that he's faced in his time at Chelsea, because of the Lukaku situation and the other injuries that he has. The history of making big calls for finals has not been kind to Premier League managers. Think back to the Harry Kane situation with Pochettino in the Champions League final. He played Harry Kane. There was the wrong move. Pep dropped Rodri and went all out attack a couple of years ago. Completely backfired. It just got into his own head. Does Tuchel play Lukaku here, despite all the evidence facing against him that Chelsea are a better side without him?
Yeah, I'm not sure why he would change from what played midweek, because it worked pretty well against Lille to have, Hakim Ziyech coming over from one side. I know he picked up a knock in the second half, but it seems he's going to be okay to play at Wembley on Sunday. Pulisic on the left-hand side, who took his goal really well, and then Kai Havertz just as the false nine to drag defenders around. Again, Kai Havertz is such a big game player. Scores a winner in a Champions League final, scored the winner recently in the Club World Cup final. Havertz has never let them down when he played through the middle. I know the idea was that they wanted to get Lukaku, and he was going to be the quote-unquote final piece of the jigsaw that would allow Chelsea to play maybe in a slightly different way and to be able to get the ball up to him and for him to be more of a pure finisher. But you can't forget the game of 7 touches against Crystal Palace 2 weeks ago now, where Lukaku looked entirely disinterested. And I thought there was some good shielding used by Thomas Tuchel afterwards, because when he went to his press conference on the Monday ahead of the game against Lille, he defended Lukaku entirely and almost said, it's my fault for asking him to do too much defensively, and we've been changing around our shape, and Romelu has been affected by this, and it's not entirely his fault. And then quietly he just drops Romelu Lukaku for the game against Lille on Tuesday. So if you were going on the form of the players and what they did midweek, I think Chelsea would stick as close to the starting 11 that they played against Lille as they possibly can. That looked like if Chelsea were picking their best 11 currently on form, that's the team that you would pick. And then we have to wait and see what Kovacic's injury is like and whether Hakim Ziyech can start. But now you feel, Colm, I don't really see why he would bring Lukaku back in here.
No, they're more fluid without him.
You can't carry a player like Lukaku.
Well, I know. I at the same time though, I'd be keen enough to defend Lukaku because when he is on form, he's unbelievable, and it's actually easy to forget that because I feel with Lukaku, when he's bad, he's rotten. There's no subtlety to his poor play, and like Will alluded to it there, 7 touches against Crystal Palace. Jamie Vardy had 9 touches against Crystal Palace at Sellers Park a few years ago, but Vardy did substantial damage with those touches, whereas Lukaku was anonymous, and that's the problem with him. When he's brilliant, he's almost untouchable at number 9 level. In terms of, I'm not saying the modern football because it was only last season that he was ripping it up at Inter, but I just think he's essentially dispensable. Yeah. That's what it comes down to, and Tuchel knows that, and I think Lukaku knows that, and I think that's why Lukaku's massively regretted this career decision. He wanted to go back. He had unfinished business at Chelsea, started very well, scored at the Emirates Stadium, but he literally came out and said, you know, I kind of alluded to the fact I've made a mistake here, and Tuchel's not that bothered without him. I watched the Lille match. It was the most convincing, pretty dull last 16 2-0 win. Lille were handy in bits and pieces, but Chelsea were just in complete control because every outfield player was in sync with each other. And I feel a bit for Lukaku because he's an outstanding striker, but the problem with him is that his options of elite clubs are kind of dying out because football's kind of going away from his style of play a bit. Or unlike, say, Sergio Aguero in the first few years with Manchester City under Pep Guardiola, I don't know if Lukaku's able to adapt his game sufficiently to the manager's liking, unlike Aguero was able to do.
Yeah, I think Lukaku would be class for Burnley.
What?
Do you know what was forgotten though, lads, back in December when Lukaku gave that fairly explosive interview to Sky Italia, and the line that pretty much came out was that Romelu Lukaku regrets leaving Inter and wants to go back to Inter, and everything kind of came focused around the transfer.
Yeah.
Was that Lukaku had also spoken fairly extensively in that interview about the fact that he wasn't enjoying playing in Thomas Tuchel's system, and that was somewhat overlooked because the sexier headline is because he wants to leave the club. But that was kind of not really even addressed a huge amount of the time, that Lukaku feels he's not getting the most out of himself as part of Tuchel's tactical system. Like Conte clearly set the team up last year to get the most out of Lukaku and Lautaro Martinez. And Lukaku had a lot of freedom to move around, and Inter were all about trying to get the ball up to Lukaku and getting crosses into the box. The way that Thomas Tuchel likes to play football, it would seem, does not suit Romelu Lukaku despite his individual talent.
No, it doesn't. And on the opposite scale, you've got Havertz, who is very suited to the system and can do other things other than be a focal point up front. Gary Lineker compared him to Glenn Hoddle. During the week,
he compared Havertz to Hoddle.
Havertz to Hoddle, saying that he seems to glide across the ground, different position, but Hoddle-esque in some ways. Max Rustin replied to that saying quite Berbatov-y to me, which I don't know. It's gone a long way to compare.
Two massive compliments to Havertz,
Berbatov, yeah.
especially to Hoddle.
Oh,
Hoddle was unbelievable.
I think the Berbatov one's a bigger.
Hoddle was transformational the way he played football. He's way ahead of his time. Yeah. I think Havertz is good, but
you mentioned
stand out to me that much.
You mentioned the Lille game during the week for Chelsea in the Champions League. I actually tweeted about this to ask for a couple of suggestions. I'm not sure if you saw it, because Renato Sanches was playing in the midfield for Lille, and he was really good. He was actually Lille's best player by a mile. But I always get that with Renato Sanches. Like I suddenly turn on a random football match and there he is playing for that team, and he's that guy. He's that guy in football. So not to be confused with that man, which is an entirely different thing, because that's what you are if you're a Glenn Murray who you score loads of goals for a relegation candidate team. You're that man again, Glenn Murray. Yeah. Whereas that guy is the guy you point at the TV and say, oh, there's Renato Sanches. I didn't know he played for Lille. Who's that guy?
Adel Taarabt.
Oh, that's a good one.
He played.
Sometimes I forget that he played
centre mid for Benfica against Ajax in the Champions League midweek in a knockout championship.
Did you text me about that, or
no,
I think other people may have texted me?
I think everyone texted you about it because that's news.
Oh no, I sent the text myself. I actually texted my friends to say Adel Taarabt is playing for Benfica.
Centre mid for Benfica in a 2-2 draw against Ajax in the Champions League. I'm so proud of him. That guy was going nowhere fast in his career. I look at him now like
the greatest
straight
streets,
up in the LinkedIn.
The greatest streets will not forget player of the Premier League era.
It's unbelievable.
Is Adel Taarabt.
You know another one as well, associate. Kenwyne Jones only seemed to play for clubs that were red and white stripes. Did he play for all the 3 red and white
for
stripes?
Sunderland.
Stoke, Sunderland, Southampton. Is that right?
I can't remember him at Southampton, but he definitely played for Stoke.
I'm
and
pretty
Sunderland.
certain he played for Southampton.
Raji Nainggolan was another one. Hatem Ben Arfa, another name thrown out by somebody who was replying to it.
Who's he played for? He came on the other day, Ben Arfa for someone.
I think he's playing in France at the minute. Victor Moses is another player that I think he randomly turns up in certain games.
Yeah.
Will, any suggestions for this?
I don't know about the random side to it, but I'm kind of thinking of there are loads of players who've gone around clubs and you're just wondering how it happened. Kevin Prince Boateng being one that would definitely jump to mind here.
Las Palmas.
Yeah, like he was basically went all over the place, and then he still ends up playing for AC Milan and Barcelona as part of his career as well, while going to smaller clubs. It's almost like when they investigate the CV of Renato Sanches, because all expectation is, look, Lille aren't getting back into the Champions League for next year based on their form in the French league this year. That Sanchez, who missed out on his move last year when there was a big exodus, will probably leave this year and will probably go to a big European club. Is that you look at his CV and Swansea is just going to stick out in the middle of this, because you go, well, he won a French league in Lille, he played for Bayern Munich, he played for Benfica, he's probably going to play for one of the big Spanish clubs next season, and the next thing, an uninspired loan move to Swansea is right there in the middle of the CV, where people go, did he really play for Swansea at some point?
That was when Paul Clement was managing.
Yeah, and he knew
Paul Clement.
He brought him in. Ben Arfa plays for Lille, of course.
Yeah.
So he came on the other day against Chelsea, and Kenwyne Jones did play for all 3.
Well,
so there you go.
I would throw, before we move on to an actual topic of conversation, Arturo Vidal is another one that I would throw into the list.
He's too big.
But he's played. He's like
played for everyone big.
He's the same thing, but for all the super clubs. Because he's played for Leverkusen, who were a big club when he was playing for them, Juve, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Inter Milan.
No, he doesn't touch Christian Vieri, who was the ultimate played for everybody good. And also way more Australian than I thought he ever was, like proper Aussie accent, but plays for Italy. By the way, this is a repeat, this League Cup final this weekend of the 2005 showdown, which Chelsea won 3-2. Jose Mourinho's first trophy as Chelsea manager. Who scored the winner for Chelsea?
Drogba?
No, Drogba's got the second. No, one of their many forgotten strikers in the Roman Abramovich era.
Right.
Mutu?
There's a number of one. Adrian Mutu?
No, not Mutu.
Crespo?
No, he played in their time though.
What
Crespo was
year?
at Milan that season, wasn't he?
That's right, actually. But he would have played around that era. He was one of the first tranche of signings.
Shevchenko?
No, came from PSV Eindhoven. You're going to kick yourselves now. He's a classic football manager player.
God, I'm coming on.
Will I tell you?
Go on, Colm.
Matej Kezman.
Oh, yeah.
And
I don't remember his career at all.
Rundled it in, yeah. And
again, classic again, a player who they had to set a penalty up for to get him off the kind of scoring run.
Yeah, he's like Diego Forlan. Yeah, he couldn't score for ages. And Liverpool's second goal scored that day was the only goal he ever scored at Liverpool.
Midfielder, striker.
Midfielder, very underwhelming career. Had one season at Liverpool, signed from Real Madrid.
Nunes?
Yes, Antonio Nunes.
Yeah.
Do you remember him? He was a make weight in the Michael Owen deal.
Yeah. Okay,
loads of fun facts.
Shall we move on to an actual conversation rather than
whoa.
Right, let's move on to the shirt that you're wearing, Manchester United. You're wearing a classical jacket. I'm describing it to the radio listeners now. The blue one that everyone knows about, all the stars all over it. Ralph Rangnick has sort of
great segue.
He's sort of figured his way through this United system at the minute. He seems to be learning what's going wrong and solving the issues slowly. It's been uninspiring. It hasn't been fun. It's been pretty miserable, but it seems like he knows what's happening. It seems like he knows the players that he wants and does not want at the club. Should he move into a role of more authority? And it seems like he has the power now. It does seem like the public opinion has turned against these United players because of the leaks, and people are on the side of Ralph Rangnick. There was reports that Anthony Elanga, Jadon Sancho are the only players that he would keep if he was.
But they buy into a system.
Yeah, because I mean, they look like they are buying into a system, and the rest he's not too pushed on. Victor Lindelof playing right back tells you a lot about what Rangnick thinks about Aaron Wan-Bissaka and about Dalot as well. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to fix. Do you think the tide's turning now? Do you think United are going to be able to fix it with Rangnick at the helm?
It totally depends.
Not as manager, but as some sort of advisor.
It's all determined what they do in the summer. Because the problem is, at the moment, what do we know? End of February, nobody knows what's going to happen in the summer. Nobody. There's a few crucial players out of contract. There are even more players who have a year left in their contract. Ralph Rangnick, by all accounts, doesn't know what role he's going to fulfill in the consultancy capacity if he does leave as manager. And we ultimately don't know who's going to be the manager, and neither do the players. So it's a very strange limbo phase that Manchester United are currently in. And at the same time, I give Ralph Rangnick huge credit, because he has shored up United considerably since he came in. Look, nobody became a United fan because of their tight defence, so it's not exactly an exciting era for United at the moment, but they're a lot more solid. They're still relying too much on David De Gea, but I don't think he really had to make a save against Atletico the other night. Atletico should have won the game, but they didn't. And there is still a chance of a goal every time United play. Like as we've seen, I think they've scored in every match. I think they have under Rangnick, but it's not exactly exciting. The thing with it is, you've actually touched on it there, Enda. It's about time that the anger turn on the players. I, like, as a United fan, I think they're a very unlikable bunch. I like Paul Pogba. I really like Pogba. I
actually do too.
I really see the good side of Pogba. He frustrates me, but I see the good side of him.
You are seeing the difference that he makes to the team.
I really like
Pogba. Last performances, even though he is frustrating, even though he goes on hot streaks, the difference that he makes to the midfield is night and day.
But he should go, and he will go for himself. I love Jadon Sancho. I think he's probably United's best player, and Alanga's great. But I can't stand Bruno Fernandes. I can't stand his attitude and his gesticulating. I can't watch him. He reminds me a bit of Robbie Keane at times in an Ireland shirt towards the end. Keane used to be murdered for gesticulating to other players, and it's just, I find it very difficult to watch him. I think Ronaldo is I think that project needs to just end for everybody concerned. There's just a lot of problems at that club, and a lot of players I think need to leave, and I give huge credit to Rangnick. I don't think at the same time in 5 years' time we're going to look back and think, geez, that was a great era when he was manager, and we might even forget he was manager. But I think the work he's doing now is crucial if they get the appointment right in the summer, and that's the crucial part of it.
I think it depends what role he goes into as well, because if he does go into a director of football role, he has been inside the dressing room. He's already identified the players that he wants and doesn't want in the club, and ultimately that will be his role. It will be deciding who comes in, the overall philosophy of the club, who comes in, who goes out, who they get rid of, and I think he's quickly identified who he wants to get rid of. So that can be good for United if he does move into it. But again, it's so bizarre that he doesn't himself know what's happening next year.
Well,
maybe he does, and he's just being coy about it, but it seems like they have no idea.
But the other problem is Fernandes and Ronaldo are still very effective players, and Fernandes is usually involved in anything good to United. It's their attitude is the problem. That's what I mean. A lot of talent there. It's the attitude is the issue. Yeah.
Roy Keane, Gary Neville and a couple other pundits are very on the side of United need a personality here, Will, because as good as Ralph Rangnick has been, the uninspiring element is just down to his the personality of Ralph Rangnick. He's very straightforward, very straight talking, but he's not what you would call a charismatic leader. One name that springs to mind for somebody who has gone into a club and been an immediate personality, has strong will, has strong character, and is a very good modern manager is the manager that they're coming up against at the minute, in Diego Simeone. Is he a name that United should be going for here, instead of a Pochettino who, may not have the strength of will, quote unquote, to take the reins and get rid of the players that they don't need and actually be that personality to take United forward?
Well, the big question about Diego Simeone is, are Manchester United fans accepting of the type of football that Diego Simeone would bring to Old Trafford? Maybe they are, because of how expectations have changed for United over the last couple of years. But if there is this mythic idea out there of playing Alex Ferguson style counter-attacking exciting football, you're unlikely to get that with Diego Simeone, who sets up so safety first. And this season he's been kind of forced into change because of drop in form of some players, because of the type of players they have. I never would have imagined that Diego Simeone would have went into a round of 16 game, for example, with two players who effectively dropped back as number 10s in João Felix and in Correa. But that's what they did. And it was quite bizarre seeing Manchester United only having Fred as an anchor in their midfield when Atletico's two most dangerous attackers were effectively running into that zone throughout the game. But Simeone is likely to be available. It really feels like he's into his last throws with Atletico Madrid. They're in a real fight to try and get into the top 4 in La Liga. Taking that game into account midweek, it's 4 wins in their last 8 in all competitions. Their bad run of form has come at a bad time when Barcelona have hit form and got into the top 4, beating Atletico a couple of weeks on the way to get there. There's likely to be 3 managers that Manchester United will be interested in this summer, realistically. Unless Pochettino wins the Champions League, and as it works out, it could happen with Paris Saint-Germain in Paris after the move of the Champions League final. Unless Pochettino wins the Champions League, he's likely to leave PSG because there's well-documented issues he's had with Leonardo, their sporting director. You've Conte, based on his comments coming out of the Tottenham game against Burnley, is fairly unlikely, it would seem, to stay around at Tottenham for too long, whether that's a decision made by Tottenham or a decision made by Conte. He looked entirely ready to walk out the door even after that game midweek. And then you've got Diego Simeone, who are probably going to be the 3 most high-profile managers that are available. I don't know if Simeone has ever shown any great interest in managing in England. He's always mentioned the fact that he would like to go back to another of his former clubs and manage them at some point, and that's Inter Milan. I think Inter are unlikely to have a vacancy this coming summer, but possibly, say if Simeone was to take a year out, is there a chance in the summer of 2023 that they might go for Diego Simeone and bring back one of their favourite players to be the manager at the San Siro? Again, I just don't know. Simeone is a little bit of a punt if they're going for him, given the style of football. Not sure what his English is like or what his desire will be to manage Manchester United, but chances are the Argentine is going to need a job this summer.
Well, I think that's one of the issues, is that Simeone doesn't actually speak English, and that's one of the issues he would have with coming to a club like United. But I guess you mentioned something there about the Alex Ferguson style of football. The United way does not exist. It's not a thing. It's said to be a thing, but it's not. United play the brand of football that Alex Ferguson played, and that changed over time. With Simeone, you've got a proven manager who has done it at a big club. He's won multiple trophies. And United don't need an Alex Ferguson. They're still striving for that 20-year manager stint. They need a manager to come in and win a trophy. That's what United need. And I think Simeone would be able to do that. But whether he's the man for United or not is another story. We should talk about Spurs and about Conte as well, because he had some fairly explosive things to say in his press conference after the Burnley defeat at the weekend. So we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back with that just after these. Now you're welcome back to Team 33. Enda Coll here with you up until about 10 o'clock this evening. Colm Boohig is with me, as is Will O'Callaghan, as we work through the biggest stories in the Premier League and across football as well. It was a big Champions League week, so we'll finish on that. But Antonio Conte, very explosive stuff in his press conference against Burnley, almost questioning his entire life in this space of 30 to 40 seconds. And it was almost as if he didn't believe that this was going to be reported and going to be on worldwide news for the next 24 hours or so. Burnley can do that to you.
Yeah.
Burnley can break you as a manager. It just felt like Conte was a little bit broken after that. Or he is a very good actor who knows what he's doing and is trying to force Daniel Levy's hand here. Which is it?
I don't think he's an actor. I think that was all legitimate, but I think the thing with Conte is he doesn't care how he comes across.
True.
He is enough. His reputation is strong enough in the game that he, I think, feels free that to be able to speak openly about how he feels. And ultimately, it comes down to finance too. The man doesn't need any money, so if he walks away, it's fine. Look, he turned him down in the summer. I think people forget about this. He never really wanted to go there anyway. But since Manchester United turned him down, he felt a bit of retribution was on the cards, and he took over at Spurs. So, as you know, with Spurs being one of United's rivals, I wasn't too displeased that he took the Spurs job, because I ultimately didn't think he wanted it. And my brother-in-law's Spurs season ticket holder, and I was texting him after the Burnley result midweek, which was in the aftermath, of course, of the 3-2 win at Manchester City, and I just said, Spurs are strange. And he was like, yeah, this is classic Spurs. And then he texted back a couple of hours later and he says, I think we've broken Conte. And this would be a pretty mild-mannered Spurs fan who was quite patient, and he's like, I don't think he wants to stay here. And I think if he could, I think he was joking. I think if he could, he'd walk away. And if it ensured that he didn't lose out too much financially, I think he'd just go. And I think he's just counting down the days to the summer. I don't think he ultimately wants to be there. I don't think he ever wanted to be there.
I don't think he wanted to be there, and it's sort of a running theme with Conte at Spurs, because, I mean, he came in, did pretty well first couple of weeks, and then he did an interview with Sky where he said that the job is quite big, a lot bigger than he expected. There's a lot going on in the dressing room that's causing issues.
He doesn't like the players.
So that happened. Then a couple of weeks come by. There seems to be a little bit of progress. Then the interview with Sky Italia comes out. Now this is happening. It does seem like he's at the end of his tether. The Spursy thing is a weird one, right? Because I mean, everyone knows the joke, and it sort of stems from Roy Keane's, lads at Spurs, and Spurs are notorious for, getting your hopes up and killing it immediately the next week. That seems to be what's happening. It just seems like to be like a psychological thing with them, that no matter what the manager, no matter what the team, they just end up disappointing you in the end. Is Conte going to leave here? Is he going to walk? It seems to me he's laying his cards on the table. He's saying, this isn't me. It's not the fact that I just can't get these players into order. This is the club. This is the players that I'm working with. And it almost seems like the job is a little bit too big for him, because he has never managed a club like this before. He's always been a super club, a big title chasing club. Tottenham just aren't that, and they do struggle to keep in touch with Liverpool and City.
Well, look, alarm bells were ringing the moment that Antonio Conte decided to take the Tottenham job mid-season, because when he had the conversations with them in the summer, it seemed very clear that Antonio Conte was not buying into the project that Spurs were putting out in front of him. You're going into a club where they're notoriously well run, but also miserly well run. This has been Daniel Levy's way of doing things. We're all familiar with the fact that Tottenham are more than happy to wait until very late in the transfer window to try and snag a bargain, as opposed to trying to get a player in who can be settled before the start of the season. They have no problem when it comes to players who want out, to run it right down to the end of the window to try and extract the biggest possible price for them, even if it might affect the club by not getting that transfer business done in time. Letting Christian Eriksen leave mid-season. We remember it isn't too long ago, back in lockdown, lads, when we were watching the Amazon documentary and, marvelling at some of the decisions that Spurs were making behind the scenes and wondering how Jose Mourinho was almost putting up with some of it. Well, Antonio Conte has shown throughout his career that he will not put up with things not being done his way. And he left Inter Milan after leading to a first Serie A title in a decade in the summer, because he felt that Inter Milan were not keeping the players that he needed for this season and weren't being ambitious enough in the transfer market to try and push on from last year. So Antonio Conte was very unlikely to suffer fools easily once he went in, and he would have been expecting instant results and to be getting Tottenham Hotspur back up into the Champions League places straight away. And it has gone well in some games. Look at the way that Tottenham played and the resilience that they showed against Manchester City to come back and secure that victory at the weekend. And they almost looked entirely justified in keeping Harry Kane with the way that he played against Manchester City at the weekend. The first thing that came into my mind was, why did Manchester City buy out Jack Grealish's payout clause and spend 100 million of the Queen's pounds to get him in, when they could have potentially added, say, 50 million onto that and got Harry Kane and solved all of their striking problems in one go? But at the moment, Tottenham have got probably two players who are worthy of being inside the top four, Son Heung-min and Harry Kane. They got to keep hold of them, and it seems very difficult that they're going to keep hold of Antonio Conte. And you'd have to wonder where next for Spurs after this, because Daniel Levy has gone in the post-Pochettino era to, very classical, proven manager in Jose Mourinho, to a very fashionable manager in making the appointment from Wolves last year. And it doesn't quite work out for Espirito Santo, so he goes. And then you go to Antonio Conte, who's meant to be a proven winner, but the proven winner isn't happy with the way the Spurs are doing their business. I'm not entirely sure where actually Spurs go from here, because talking to a few mates of mine after the City game at the weekend who support Tottenham, the first thing they said was, watch us go and drop points against Burnley midweek. I don't think they were necessarily expecting to lose, but the old classic, here's one of the best performances Spurs have put in 2 seasons, and then they'll go and mess up next time round. Spurs being Spurs is not a cliche for no reason.
Yeah, it's quite hard watching it at times, just watching them, shoot themselves in the foot repeatedly. Listen, Conte's a proven winner. He's done it at every club, and ultimately what he comes up against is the hierarchy. Every time it's we need to spend money to continue to be great. That's generally what goes wrong, and ultimately he ends up being right in the end. It seems like Conte has come into this almost expecting the exact same treatment that he gets in the first couple of years at the other clubs that he's been to. And Spurs just won't do that. Yeah. And I think everybody except for Conte seem to see that, unless Conte, being quite cynical about this, actually did see it and thought, I'll spend 7 months here in London, get a nice little payout, I'll continue on with my day, and I'll get another big club in a couple of years' time. That's been the most cynical. But we'll move on to Champions League stuff, because it was Champions League during the week, Europa League, Europa Conference League as well. Champions League final, as of Friday, has been moved to Paris from Russia because of the escalating situation with Russia and Ukraine. Spartak Moscow are still playing in the Europa League, and that just doesn't seem right to me. In a way, listen, football at this point in time is the least of our worries with Russia and what's going on, but everybody who has a position of power should be doing everything possible to punish Russia here and show them that this is not acceptable and there are repercussions. Spartak Moscow should not be in the competition anymore. Zenit were knocked out. If they were still in it, they should be kicked out of it as well. UEFA obviously in a tricky position with Gazprom, but I mean, UEFA are going to have to find another sponsor. They just can't continue in this. It's too serious a situation for a club to be put in a situation where RB Leipzig are being put into this position where they're going to have to play Spartak Moscow in a neutral venue, and they have the idea of playing a Russian club on their hands while Russia are invading a sovereign union.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really surprised that there hasn't been action taken already. Who played Real Betis last night? Zenit, yeah. I mean, I can't believe that went ahead.
It's bizarre, isn't it? The same
weird.
day that Russia invade cities that we've all grown familiar with through football. Because I mean, we're talking through this through the form of football. Most football fans will. It's the greatest geography lesson you can possibly get if you're interested in geography. I mean, the very first thing. It's the worst thing that I'm going to say, but the very first thing that came to my mind about the Donetsk invasion was, I wonder what's going to happen to Shakhtar now as a club. But that's just the way that I sort of think about things in football terms. It's utterly bizarre that the Zenit were allowed to play in this competition the same day that Russian troops were airstriking Ukraine.
I mean, my prediction would be that they'll now take stock, and there will be an expulsion inputted for the rest of the season. It'll already have been a bit too late because of this week's fixtures, but they have to be seen to do something. But then again, like if you're backing UEFA to do the quote-unquote right thing morally and ethically, it's a big bet to make.
Yeah.
And you could lose a lot of money on it.
Well, I know it's a different organisation, but it's with FIFA as well. Gianni Infantino was hardly convincing in his...
FIFA and UEFA, I'm bundling them in together.
In terms of international football as well, this impacts Ireland's campaign as well, because obviously they're in a group with Ukraine. The word at the minute is that the games will be played in a neutral venue against Ukraine. Potentially, if situations escalate to the point where that game can't be fulfilled, Finland will take Ukraine's place because they were behind them when it came to it. Where do you stand on this situation?
Well, look, it depends how quickly the situation plays out to probably determine what's going to happen in the Nations League, but I'd be surprised if Ireland's games against Ukraine, should they go ahead in the Nations League, wouldn't be played in Switzerland or played in Germany as opposed to being played in Kiev. But look, I think you get into a slippery slope if you start removing teams from competitions based on what their nation state have been involved in geopolitics. Like, was there not an argument in 2014 when Russia decided to annex parts of Crimea that potentially major sporting events should have been taken away from them, which didn't happen. They ended up having the Winter Olympics in Sochi, and we all know that during the Sochi Games there was state-sponsored doping by Russia, where they saw the value of bringing home multiple medals on home soil and what that does for a state, and they were still allowed to compete in 2016 at the Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, despite the fact what had happened in 2014, and despite all the concerns about Russian doping and Russian aggression in Crimea back in 2014. They still hosted the FIFA World Cup in 2018, at which point Gianni Infantino was able to get a medal of friendship from Russia as part of the ceremony. They were able to put on a good show. Plenty of people went to Russia and said they had a fantastic time in the few weeks that summer that they had spent there during the 2018 World Cup. And it just goes to show the power of sport within politics and within geopolitics as well. So you could argue that all of this is tremendously intertwined, But why step in and kick out Zenit or kick out Spartak Moscow now when major sporting organisations didn't move when there was previous aggression back in 2008 or in 2014? It's a slippery slope if you start to do this.
Yeah, well, you're also talking. I mean, this is why we need to talk about, because you see fans constantly bringing it up on social media. It's the manner of this football support now. This is why we need to talk about Newcastle. This is why we need to talk about these situations and address them at the time, because, I mean, Saudi Arabia are currently involved in a bombing campaign in Yemen that has horrendous consequences for the people in that country, and have been doing so for years now. Yet Newcastle are owned by a Saudi regime. Same with Chelsea. You know, everybody knows the connections between Roman Abramovich and the Russian regime. There's pictures of Roman Abramovich with Putin sitting next to him at a desk. They are friends. They know each other well. He is a key instigator with the Russian state, and you know that's what's being thrown on in the British Parliament at the minute. What's going to happen to Chelsea, for example, who are owned by a Russian oligarch? So there's a lot of consequences that need to be unfurled here. But I guess as much as talking doesn't really solve anything, it is why we should be highlighting these things.
No, but actions do. Like, Will's point is really valid, right? That, why would you expel teams now when you didn't in 2014 with Crimea? But this time, you have to make an exception because we're on the verge of global war here. Yeah. So you have to take a stand.
There is precedent for it as well, because Yugoslavia was thrown out of the Euros and Denmark took their place eventually onto one.
It's not fair on those teams at all, but there has to be a global stand against what we're on the verge of. And I'm not being too dramatic here by following it up by saying before it's too late, because before this thing completely escalates, and hopefully it will never get to that point, but we just don't know right now when we're sitting here today.
Yeah, and look, Spartak Moscow being thrown out of the Europa League is not going to stop this.
No, it's not, but it's at every step.
It's a step, because if you look at the Russian World Cup and look at what's the Qatari World Cup this year, the Saudi Gulf situation, people might grow tired of those conversations, but the 2018 World Cup did massive things for Russia in terms of people coming back from it, seeing what Russia was like, and being surprised by how modern and how free it was and how happy the people were.
Yeah.
And now look where we are. So that is what sports watching does.
Significant as well, lads, the fact that China have just hosted the Winter Olympics.
Exactly.
There's
no horrific
doubt,
stuff happening in China right now.
And also no doubt that Russia's current aggression within eastern Ukraine would not have gone ahead without China say so. There's no way that Putin won't have spoken to China before deciding to go to Ukraine, because he knows that the EU, NATO and the USA are likely to be on the other side of him as they decide to go with these actions within Ukraine currently. He'll say they've been invited in to try and keep the peace. Ukrainian people will say they're being invaded. But Putin would not have brought troops over the border without China at least saying that they weren't going to be aggressive on the other side. And China have just used the Winter Olympics as an opportunity to sell themselves to the world just a month ago as well.
Yeah, awful stuff. All we can do at the minute, we're not going to solve anything on the show tonight, but our thoughts obviously go out to everybody who's involved on that side of Europe, and hopefully will solve itself at some point in the near future. Hopefully it doesn't escalate too much, and we'll see an end to this. But we'll take a quick break here on Team 33, and we'll come back after.